In an earlier video, we looked at the development of the contrapposto stance in the nude male figure in ancient Greek sculpture. In this video, we turn our attention to the clothed female figure, paying particular attention to the treatment of drapery and its relation to changes in stance. We begin in the Archaic period in the 6th century BC and end with the Classical period in the 5th century BC. We will look at 3 marble sculptures: a mid-6th century BC kori from Miletus, a late 6th century BC kori from Athens, and a pair of late 5th century BC caryatids also from Athens. Sculptors in mainland Greece began to carve life-size, freestanding human figures in the 6th century BC. These figures were made of marble or limestone, and they were painted. In the 20th century, the archaic female figure came to be called a kori. In ancient Greek, this is the word for young woman. The male figure is called a kouros, meaning young man. The kori is clothed, the kouros is nude. Both were painted according to traditional conventions for skin colors. That is, males have darker skin than females. These two are modern reconstructions based on 6th century BC originals. 6th century BC sculptors aimed to create lifelike human images, but they were also aiming to make beautiful works of art. A sculpture of a clothed body provided an opportunity to draw attention to the decorative possibilities of fabric. For instance, colors and patterns made by weaving and embroidery can be painted onto the surface of the marble. Folds of fabric can be carved in plain and complex grooves and ridges. In the 6th and 5th centuries BC, Greek women wore a long peplos woven from wool or a long chiton woven from linen or wool. They also wore shawls and stoles, which they wrapped around their bodies in a variety of ways. A kori from Miletus in present-day Turkey belongs to the middle of the 6th century BC. With the head, this marble sculpture would have been life-size. She wears a chiton and a shawl and a stole. Both arms are close to her body. Her left hand holds a partridge against her chest, an offering or perhaps a pet. She stands still. Both feet are flat on the ground, and the weight of the body is evenly distributed. Some of her clothes contribute a sense of movement that contrasts with the stillness of her body. For instance, the wavy folds of the stole hanging from her right shoulder add movement. The wavy edge feels active, in contrast with the static lowered arm nearby. More movement comes from the folds of the shawl and the upper part of her chiton above her waist. The folds are carved as narrow lines running in many directions. Her breasts are visible under the fabric. Below the waist, the folds of the chiton are flatter and less active. Evenly spaced vertical pleats flank a slightly wider central panel. The pleats hide the body underneath and recall fluting on the shaft of a column, an appropriate way of conveying stillness. This kori was made in Athens in about 510 BC. Like the kori of Miletus, she wears a chiton. She stands a bit over a meter tall. Her arms are more active than those of the previous kori. She brings her right arm forward and may have held out an offering in her missing hand. Her left hand is lowered, but unlike the inactive lowered hand of the previous kori, this one has gathered the lower part of her chiton into a big vertical fold below her hips. This gesture pulls the fabric tightly around her lower body, so some of her body is visible underneath her clothing. And this makes for a more lifelike appearance, that is, a greater awareness of the body underneath the drapery. The clothing offers a pleasing play of contrasting textures. The linen fabric above the hips, for instance, looks bulky, heavy, and crinkled. The same linen fabric below the hips looks flat, transparent, and clingy. the position of the legs and feet has slightly changed. The kori's right leg is a bit farther back than the left, suggesting a greater sense of movement than if both feet were together. Both feet are, however, still flat on the ground, and the weight of the body is evenly distributed. In the 5th century BC, the stance changes with the introduction of contrapposto. Contrapposto refers to the way a figure stands, primarily the position of the legs. Contrapposto makes the human figure in Greek sculpture look more lifelike. Instead of having the body weight evenly distributed, contrapposto allows the body weight to be unevenly distributed. This is how contrapposto looks on a male figure from the mid-5th century BC. Both feet are still flat on the ground, but his right leg bears more of the body weight. The relaxed leg, which bears less of the body's weight, is bent at the knee. Contrapposto also leaves its mark on the clothed figure. Early examples of contrapposto in clothed figures can be seen in a group of 6 marble sculptures known as caryatids. They are a type of kori and date to the late 5th century BC. They were made for the Erechtheion, a temple on the Acropolis in Athens. They supported the architrave on one of the temple's porches. The figures in this photo are not the originals. These 2 original caryatids belong to the Acropolis Museum in Athens. Each is over 2 meters tall. Each wears a peplos. The upper part of the peplos has irregular bulky folds. This is similar to the upper parts of the chitons worn by our 2 6th century BC kori. But the folds below the waist and the stance are different. The right leg, with the foot flat on the ground, is the weight-bearing leg. It is straight. The left leg is bent at the knee and brought slightly forward. This is the relaxed leg that bears less of the body's weight. In the 5th century BC, both feet are still flat on the ground. In later clothed sculptures, the heel of the bent leg is slightly off the ground. The classical convention for showing contrapposto in a clothed figure is to show the weight-bearing leg as straight and covered with fabric that falls in thick vertical folds. These heavier folds recall the flutings of a column. Since columns can support a lot of weight, this resemblance emphasizes the location of the weight-bearing leg. The fabric on the other leg, the one bearing less weight, is pulled tight by the bending leg. It appears smoother, thinner, and lighter in weight.